and welcome to the Post About Ghosts podcast. I'm your host, Chellemo, and with me is my wonderful co-host, Aidy.
Hello.
Today, Aidy, we are back to urban legends.
Yes.
And this week, we are covering, well, I'll say we're covering the Roswell incident, but we've got a little more than that. The UK actually has its own Roswell incident.
Yes, it does.
And we're gonna tackle both of those today. I guess this goes back to July of 1947.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening near the Roswell Army Airfield in New Mexico. Where this takes off is a farmer, Mac Brazel, and a boy. I don't know if it's his farmhand or who, but he's got a neighbor boy with him named Timothy D. Proctor, and they call him D.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking his sheep out to pasture, and they come upon a massive, what they call a massive debris field.
Right.
Metal pieces, things everywhere, like huge. And the sheep won't go through it. They literally have to be driven around it because they refuse to go through, push through this area. So they have to be driven all the way around it. And Mac, he's looking at this thinking, who in the hell is going to clean this up? You know, he's upset. He gets out and he picks up some of it. And they take it to Dee's parents and show it to Dee's mother. She's looking at the metal. She tells him, you know, you might have a UFO here. You better report this.
Interesting.
From there, Mac goes into town and stops at a bar and shows some people there what he has as well.
Right.
And you know, this thing, there's a lot more to this story than we're going to cover today because there's a lot of stories from the people that were in the bar. There are stories of people, what they experienced themselves that night. There's a lot out there, but basically we're going to walk you through the main facts of the main incident at the crash site.
Okay.
He goes from the bar to a pharmacy to use their phone to call, let's see, what's the sheriff? Yeah, it's Sheriff George Wilcox. He takes the story and he gets the Army Airfield involved at Roswell. And they send a guy named Jesse Marcel from the airfield out to just take a look at all this and see what's happening. So when Marcel gets there, he estimates that this debris field is about 100 to 200 feet wide and maybe 1.5 miles long. So we're talking huge area of debris.
Yeah.
And he collects some of this debris and puts it in boxes in the trunk of his car. And the interesting thing about what he does is we're talking about a very important military person who's been sent out to do an investigation for the United States government. And he has evidence in his car that he stops by his house to show his family before he takes it in and turns it in. So this is something exciting enough to make a highly respectable, important person in the military break rules to show his family what he's got. And his son claims to actually have been able to hold some of the debris.
Mm-hmm.
And it was described as metal that couldn't be you could crunch it up into a ball and it would just flatten back out. None of
Right.
them had any idea. They'd never seen anything like this before and couldn't guess what it was, other than it felt like some kind of metal. The son said that he held metal pieces that looked like little I-beams. If you know what a construction I-beam is, they were shaped kind of like that, but small. The son holds these I-beam pieces, said they felt like metal. And one of the ladies said that there were some pieces that resembled wood or plastic. So you got all kinds of stuff that he takes to Roswell. He goes in for his morning meeting that morning. He takes this evidence with him. And when he gets there, he speaks to William Blanchard, who tells him that he is going to have him transport this debris to Carswell Army Airfield in Fort Worth, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Which he does. He flies this stuff to Fort Worth, and when he gets there, he meets Brigadier General Roger Ramey. Roger Ramey takes this stuff into his office, and they take Marcel to a map room to sit and wait while they investigate.
Yeah.
When they come and get Marcel, they take him back to the office, and he said what was in that room was not what he brought. He was very adamant. He said, "This is not what I brought here." And they say pretty much, "This is what you brought here. This is a weather balloon. That's it. Don't ever talk about this again."
So the materials that they're presenting, he's saying they've changed it. Basically, they've switched it out, and this is something different.
Yes, he spends the rest of his life saying that. He never retracts that.
Yeah.
He stopped talking about it publicly after they came to him. The military came to him and said, "Look, you need to stop making up stuff about UFOs immediately, period."
Yeah.
He gets upset. His son says he gets upset and he throws away all of his military medals. He's just broken. And he doesn't say anything again until 1970. He does an interview with Leonard Nimoy for the show In Search Of. I love that show. That's a great show.
Yeah.
Where he continues to insist what they said I found was not what I took to Texas.
Right.
That's pretty much, that's where we are. So now those that like to get into their conspiracies, they have all said that this is a case of a government cover up, and like I said, there's tons of information and personal stories about Roswell out of this. So what do you think?
It's interesting. I've always having watched videos, read articles on it. The thing I've always sort of gone with is that it was some kind of secret military thing.
Right.
Now, with regards to it being a weather balloon, I don't think it was a weather balloon. But I do think that it was some kind of spy balloon that they were going to use to... because around this time, obviously, there was the whole issue with the Cold War starting. This is the very beginning of the Cold War. The end of the Second World War is 18 months, 2 years out from the end of the Second World War. It's the beginning of the Cold War. And there was a lot of paranoia. This evolved on into the 50s. You see it in a lot of the sci-fi movies in the 50s. A lot of paranoia about being attacked, sneak attacks. And I do think, that this was quite possibly an experimental, if not in production, spy balloon. They have acknowledged that they used balloons with microphones on them to try to detect the possibility of any kind of Soviet weapons test of the nuclear nature.
Right.
The one thing I've never been 100% clear on is how that works, but I know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I think one of the strange things about it is they're trying to pass it off. The military is trying to pass it off as a weather balloon. As I understand, like initially, didn't they try to pass it off as being some sort of UFO?
You know what? You are right about that. Initially, after Marcel came
Yeah,
out and took the stuff back to Roswell, and before he went to Fort Worth, they put out a statement.
yeah,
After Marcel went to Fort Worth, he came back to Roswell and they said they actually called a press conference. It was Blanchard that called a press conference and said, "Whoops, we made a mistake. It was a weather balloon."
yeah.
They told Marcel that's the end of it. Stop talking about it.
You see, those two possibilities would be deflection away from what it really was. I think, like, initially saying a UFO, it probably garnered more public attention than they originally anticipated that it would. A weather balloon's very mundane. You say it's a weather balloon, people shrug their shoulders, they get on with it. You say UFO as an attempt to try to deflect away from what something is, and suddenly you get loads of people descending on the place, wanting to try and find their own bit of this as, possible alien technology. I do think the reason why I don't believe it's extraterrestrial was the wood being part of the stuff that was found in the debris.
Yeah.
Don't see how you can use wood on on some
Travel
sort
through
of
space.
it wouldn't be the kind of material that you would expect to see. Wood is something that doesn't tend to do very well when you're dealing with extremities of environment.
Yeah.
It warps, it cracks, it swells and contracts. It's not the kind of stable material that you would want. I mean, they stopped using it in aircraft.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just due to the nature of what it is. Yes, it can be very strong, but I mean, you're talking about if something's traveling through space, I don't think wood would be material. And plus the fact it would then require them to have come from a planet with trees. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot there. I mean, I'm not saying that's not possible, but,
Right.
I don't equate wood with something. And it's certainly never something that when you hear or sort of people talk about UFO stuff later on, it's always unknown metal, some sort of advanced composite or something. Wood never comes into it. So
Right.
that is something that I would say, yeah, around that time, you probably would find it in a balloon of some description. Whether it forms part of a basket or the structure of the balloon itself. It can be lightweight, it can be molded into various shapes, but primarily it's lightweight, which is something that is a requirement in a balloon. Just to finish that point, I think if you say no one's going to come out at that time and say, oh yeah, it's a spy balloon, because straight away you're alerting people, particularly at that time it would have been the Soviets, that you're sending over spy balloons. This is an age before you have the advancements in aerial defense. There is radar. The British used radar in the Second World War to great effect, particularly during the Battle of Britain, to detect enemy aircraft. But a high altitude balloon is a different proposition. That whether it's detectable certainly to the level that you would send something up there to intercept it, plus also the difficulties of intercepting at high altitude back then as well, because as I say, it's 1947. You've got to sort of get your head out of the modern day era and realize we were still using, the jet age was only just starting. A lot of aircraft were still propeller driven and not capable of very high altitude. So it would be reasonable to use something that could just sort of drift along the air currents at high altitude. But you wouldn't want the enemy to become aware that that's what you were doing. So you would just say, they sort of realised that UFO was probably at that time not the right thing to come out with, and then went with the mundane of just saying, "Oh yeah, it's a crash weather balloon. Everybody go home. There's nothing to see here." But I don't think that's what it was. I don't think it was a weather balloon myself.
I have a couple questions about the weather balloon
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yeah.
One, these people, these local people, claimed that they were launching weather balloons every day.
Mm.
They said, we know what a weather balloon is. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have been excited to see a crashed weather balloon. We see them all the time.
Yeah.
Another thing that I question is, and we were talking yesterday, Aidy, about the size of a weather balloon. Obviously, they vary greatly in size, but
Yeah.
let's say we take everyone involved at face value and just
Mm-hmm.
everything that they say is true
Yeah.
to as far as what they saw there. With Marcel saying that we've got a debris field of 1 to 200 feet wide and about a mile and a half long, is it logical to assume that even their biggest weather balloons could make a mess like that? Is that within believability that it could have
Um,
been a weather balloon?
I don't know. To put no too finer points on it, I mean, it is possible if something comes down from a high altitude, it's
Yeah.
going to create a sizable debris field. I don't know though whether there's enough material in a weather balloon to create a debris field that big. I
Yeah.
mean, are they saying it depends on their definition of the debris field? I mean, are they saying, "Oh, well, we found this bit a mile over here, so that formulates part of the debris field"? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't wish to go ghoulish with this a little bit, but the debris field from Challenger was colossal,
Yeah, it was.
and it just depends on how you define it. If you find a bit of material, from the weather balloon, that if it started to disintegrate as it was coming down, which would indicate that would be why it would be coming down. I would say, yeah, it depends on how they define it. Do they define it on anything that they find, or does it have to be so many pieces that's discovered to
Right.
define the limits of the debris field? I honestly don't know, but anything coming out of the sky, and if it's shedding materials, it is possible
It's
that
going to
it
make a
could.
mess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not like the impact site, the
Yeah.
debris field. It's kind of like with the Titanic, the debris field's quite big because it was shedding bits as it was sinking. So I mean, it sort of you have like the main impact site, but the debris field is quite a ways around it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't know what they use to define that, but I do think if it's just a matter of one or two items, you find a mile away, well, then that's part of the debris field. Then, yeah, I do think it
It could,
is
yeah.
feasible.
I
Yeah,
see that as if it's not full of debris, but just
yeah.
it goes from outside to outside.
And I would think any kind of military balloon that is there to sort of use whatever technology is available at that time to spy, because it's got to travel such a considerable distance. I would also think that that's going to be quite big in comparison to a weather balloon as well. You see, the thing is, if you wanted to disguise the launch of something, what would you do? You would launch it in the midst of other stuff being launched. Like
Yeah.
you're launching 10 weather balloons and you just slip it in the middle of that launch, so nobody again is paying attention. Because it's like
Yeah.
you say, everybody's familiar with these weather balloons in the area going over, and then you're not really looking at it, are you? It's just like you're not focusing on it's just another balloon
Yeah.
amidst a whole load of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Again, my belief is that it wasn't. My belief that it was some sort of, whether it was experimental Whether it was something that they routinely did, I don't know, but I do think it was more military, which is why they got quite salty about telling people to shut up about it, because
Yeah.
a weather balloon, they don't care. And I again, eliminating the possibility of it being a UFO due to the nature of the material. Although the sort of memory metal, if you want to call it that, that
Yeah.
is something which is weird and unusual. But I don't know whether such things existed back then or whether they really exist today. Something.
And it's hard to really count that evidence because nobody has it. It's a shame. It the chain of command kind of went blurry, and
Yeah,
I mean, if you take what Marcel says at face value, it just disappeared. If you take
yeah,
what the Army's official statement is, it was a weather balloon. And I can't imagine if it was a weather balloon, them not being able to show, look, this is the metal you saw, because they would have more of it.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
the they said they found Marcel said it was actually his family that said they had little silky threads that when you
Mm,
put a lighter up to one end, the light would come through and out the other end. And they were questioning whether or not that was some kind of early fiber optics. But again,
mm,
no one has this stuff. I feel like if it was just a weather balloon, they would have had more of that to say, this is the material you saw. It would make sense to me to
yeah.
say, look, I have it in my hand. This is what you saw. This is where it goes on the balloon. This is what it is. But they didn't do that. So it leads into more, maybe it was some kind of spy technology, and they just tried to forget about it.
Yeah, that's it. They sort of mishandled it a little bit
Yeah.
initially by saying UFO, which, I mean, let's face it. I mean, that word is often misused. I mean, a UFO is just an unidentified flying object. I'm
Yeah.
sure that when they use that, they may not have been necessarily referring to something from outer space. They were probably using it in the truest sense of the word, which is just something that is a flying object that hasn't been identified.
Yeah, and they're
Not
even
really.
spooked by that word now. They call them
Yeah,
unidentified aerial phenomenon because they don't
yeah,
even want to admit anymore that it's an object. So,
yeah. That's So yeah, I do think that there's a greater possibility in my mind that it was just some sort of military project. Like, whether you want to say it was experimental or whether it was
mm.
something that was routinely operated. That part I don't know, but that seems to be the more likely explanation for what went on.
What I find most interesting about this, with the newspapers and the military and the local people all involved in this, and numerous people, the Marcel went home and showed his family. The farmer
Mm,
showed his farmhand's family, and then went to a bar and showed people. But there is no official date for when the crash actually happened that's on record. Nobody knows. The best they
no,
can do is guess that it was the 2nd of July in
yeah,
1947 that the actual crash happened, because they said for some reason, and again, it's all very weird how this all came about, because they said that the debris laid out there for a couple days before anybody even came to
yeah,
look at it. So I don't know if there was some kind of hold up after the sheriff called, or after the farmer called the sheriff, and it took him a couple days to get a hold of the military. I don't really know exactly where the holdup was, but supposedly it happened somewhere around the 2nd of July, and it took them 2 or 3 days to get out there. So it's all blurry, even when it exactly happened. So it's hard to say what the military was doing on the day that it happened. It's all just very strange. It's all very vague. So that and I do know, because I'm an American and I know our government, they tend to get vague when they don't want to talk. So
Yeah. Well, I think that applies to our government as well, as you'll find out when I talk about my story. Governments really don't do well when it comes to being specific, shall we
yeah,
say, when asked. I think what that does also do, I think we can safely eliminate it, because one of the things that you can always say is, could it have been the other way round? Could it have been a Soviet spy balloon coming into American airspace? Well, the reason why I kind of eliminate that is because that would imply, therefore, that it had been shot down. And if they'd shot it down, if American planes had shot down a Soviet balloon, let's say,
yeah,
they would have known pretty much where that thing was coming down.
yeah,
They would have followed it in, and it wouldn't have been 2 days before they got boots on the ground to get that.
exactly.
They would have been there straight away. So it would lead me to think that, first of all, it was of an origin that was American, that it was off doing its thing, and it, again, tracking that thing back then with the technology that they had available would have been quite difficult. And it just didn't, it crashed. They may not have known about it until they've reported it. He reports it, and then suddenly 2 days later or whatever, you've got boots on the ground. The military's there. Which would lead me to believe that they didn't know anything about it until they were notified. And then they've turned up, and you've got that initial guy going, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. And then I guess when the military gets their hands on it proper, they go, you might want to lock everything down on this, because that's one of ours and it's supposed to be top secret. And we don't want, all and sundry thinking it's anything that we don't want the public to know about. So
So what about the UK and what they don't want their public to know about?
Well, so there is a place called Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England.
There is?
And this is the site of RAF Bentwater's Woodbridge. Well, actually, it's 2 bases that are essentially jointly run. They're very closely run together. And this formulates what, I don't think it still is, but it certainly was in 1980, a US Air Force base that also had nuclear weapons there.
Colonel Holt did mention how careful they were about moving through UK territory as American military with weapons. They were very
Yes.
careful about transporting them between places over there.
Yeah, they had to sign out specific weapons, whether it was a sidearm, or I think he also referenced M16s, which were the
Yes, he did.
de facto military rifle at that time. So that they were careful about that. The sort of story that goes was by Colonel Holt, who was in the US Air Force for at least 18 years at the time of the incident. The colonel has knowledge of physics, so he's not ignorant when it comes to science.
Yeah.
He had a very good career. No history of insubordination or issues or any bizarre behavioural incidents or anything like that. He's out there pretty much in charge of a base that's got nuclear missiles on. You don't tend to give that to people that aren't, that kind of responsibility to people that aren't reliable. So this all stems around an object that was seen in the woods in a forest Rendlesham Forest in the winter of 1980. So Colonel Holt's investigation of this started when local police had advised that they'd been investigating the strange sighting out in the woods prior to Colonel Holt's involvement. From what I can ascertain in what I've seen, both in terms of videos and in what I've read, a team had already gone out to investigate a strange sighting in the woods. They come back, and then he himself goes out, and he's accompanied by a sergeant and a team of guys to investigate. He himself, he takes a camera, an audio recorder, a bit like, it's a dictaphone, he called it. It was an old tape one,
yeah.
where you're stopping and starting with the tape. And he also took out a Geiger counter. Now, obviously, I would imagine he's doing that. It's a nuclear base. If there's anybody messing around near a nuclear base, you want to make sure there's nothing atomic going on. That his responsibility is to make sure that everything to do with that base is locked down. Everything's where it should be, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So he starts out using what they call when I was watching the video, because I'll put a mention about the channel to go to watch the video, because it's really good, because the Colonel's actually interviewed on the video, and he gives a full breakdown of what happened, what he was involved in, whatever. But he mentions they were using a night vision scope called a Starlight night vision scope. Now, he does mention it was an early version of it.
Yes.
But in using the scope, he identified an area in the forest where, in the direction of where this object had initially been seen, that appeared slightly lighter, slightly brighter than the surrounding area through the night vision scope. And this bright patch correlated to the area where the object had been seen. So him and his team arrive at the site where this strange object has been seen. They note that there's 3 indentations on the ground. Now, the initial thought process would be that it was animals, because it's a forest. You've got animals in there. There are certain animals that burrow into the ground, like rabbits and stuff like that. Could it have been to do with that, animals? But he measured it out, and these markings, these indentations, were an exact distance apart from each other to form a triangle. They were a perfect equal distance apart, so the chances of animals coordinating to do something that accurate, no, there's something else there.
Well, even if they could do it, they'd never let us know, because we'd put them to work.
Well, yeah, exactly. But he's still, he's still thinking there's got to be a logical explanation for all of it. He takes a radiation sample with a Geiger counter. Now, it's not at a lethal level, but it's elevated beyond a normal level of where it should be. So again, he's also trained in measuring radiation, so you can't make any, attributions that he's reading it wrong or anything like that. He's trained. He knows how to take these measurements. Again, it's part of the responsibility of the role that he has. And he also notes that there's markings on the trees in the area as well. The other thing you notice is too, is it's in the forest. It's quite a dense tree canopy above, in and around the forest, but above the area where the indentations are, it was clear of any cover. There was no canopy, as if something had actually descended through the canopy, broke off the branches or whatever, landed there, then taken off. So, it's a strange set of circumstances, but he's still trying to appeal to the rational. He's still trying to look for something which is going to give an obvious explanation, so he can, write it off. That's what it is. Everybody calm down. Let's go back to base. But at that point, he doesn't have any answers.
Yeah. Now, what you were saying about the radiation, did he not also say that the radiation on the side of the trees that was facing the triangle area was higher than the backside?
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, so there was definitely something there that shouldn't be there. The other thing to note that he noted as well, he would do what most people do. The weather was clear. It's a cold night. It's clear weather. So you've not got lightning. You've not got some weird atmospherics going on, that you might get with a storm or even an incoming storm or anything like that. It's a cold, clear, calm night. So while he's taking readings, he notices an object out towards the coast. Now, there is a lighthouse nearby, but the Colonel Holt says he was fully aware of a lighthouse in operation nearby. The light he's seeing out towards the coast, however, is a different colour to the light that is being projected from the lighthouse. So the lighthouse light is yellow-white in colour, whereas the colour of the light coming from this object that he's seeing is bright orange and red with a black centre, so it looks like an eye. Essentially, I've got in my mind something that looks a bit like the Eye of Sauron of the Lord of the Rings films at this point. But yeah, I mean, he's like, you got to sort of take into account he's familiar with the area. He's working, living there. He knows what a lighthouse light is like. It's a beam, that's sweeping around or whatever. This is something that is apparently different. He details it. It says it appears to be stable at first, with the appearance that it was actually dripping molten metal. Again, that kind of still reminds me a bit of the Eye of Sauron. I mean, the one thing to say is this happens many, many years before the Lord of the Rings movies, so it's not like, he's sort of, I've seen the Lord of the Rings, and he's making sort of those mental leaps, like you fill in the blanks, as it were. And while all this is going on, he's concerned. There's a farmhouse nearby while all this is going on, and he has some concern for the welfare of the occupants of the house while all this is going on. Now, further on to all of that, the other members of the investigation team, because it's not just himself and this sergeant, there are other members of the team as well. They've actually taken some floodlights out to the site to help illuminate, because this is at night. So they want to get as many lights out there onto the area so they can try and find any traces of stuff. These are powered by petrol or gas, if you're American. So then they're not electrically powered. They don't need to be plugged into anything. They're using a gas generators. However, the lights weren't functioning properly. Now, initially they think, well, was it fueled up? But they were. They were fully fueled. There'd been nothing wrong with them. They'd been maintained, but they just weren't functioning correctly. In addition to that, there was interference on the walkie-talkies they were using to communicate with one another as well, which, adding to the issues that they were having with the lights, there's something not quite right going on. To cap it all off, the local animals in the forest and in the area, they're making weird noises. They're unsettled. They're not behaving in the usual manner. So yeah, it's all sort of painting a picture that something not right is going on. Something unusual is occurring there. But yeah, throughout it all, he's still trying to find a rational explanation. I mean, that's his job. They've got to make sure that there's not an impending attack. Again, we're talking now, we're at the sort of height of the Cold War. We've gone from Roswell at the beginning. This is 1980. We're at that point where, he's getting to the point before everything started to calm down. There's high alerts quite frequently. I don't know what year it was. I think it was in the early 80s, and I'm sure it was called Able Archer, which was a military exercise that actually took us right to the point of World War III, and nobody knew about it until many years later. The Soviets actually thought that NATO was about to attack them.
Yes.
And it was, I don't know how true it was, but in the story I heard, it was the Soviets were about to go to war, and it was the actions of one individual who cottoned on to the fact that this wasn't an attack, that I think it was something to do with a malfunction in their radar array or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back into it, but it was, the world was kind of on the edge. We had films that were going to come out in and around that time, TV films detailing, what would happen in the event of a nuclear attack and all of this. It was a time of, heightened paranoia.
Yeah.
And the colonel's that he needs to find out what's happening. Are we under attack? Is this some form of, new weapon system that's being deployed? And it's a nuclear base. You can't take chances. So I'm going to suggest the colonel at this point isn't thinking of the fantastic. He's not thinking of anything extraterrestrial. He's thinking more along the lines of he has to be planted in the rational, in the reality, because he could be dealing with the vanguard of an attack that's about to happen, that's going to kick off World War III.
Right.
Going back to the object, it then moves towards them. And as it approaches them, it shows intelligent behavior in the maneuvers it's making. It's maneuvering to avoid trees. So this isn't something unguided. It's not a missile, that would just sort of plow through the trees or whatever. It's not some sort of meteorite or whatever. This is guided. It's making, evasive maneuvers to avoid the trees.
So it would seem that it's also not crashing.
No, it's not, because it then returns back to the field where it had been previously, and then it dissolves into various white bright objects. So it's like it disperses almost, which is very strange. Now, one of the things that in the video that is asked of the colonel, could it have been something like ball lightning? The colonel's like, well, I don't know what ball lightning's like. I mean, what's good about the video is he answers honestly. He doesn't really go much into speculative stuff. He's like, well, I don't know because I don't know what that looks like. But can lightning avoid trees?
Yeah, he was very deliberately careful about the way he said what he said. I did notice that.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't sort of jumping about with it. And the thing with it is, well, like looking at that, yeah, lightning doesn't avoid things. It hits things. That's its nature. It's, lightning hits trees. It doesn't avoid trees. It hits trees. So why would it be taking evasive maneuvers? It would just hit a tree.
Yeah.
That's what it would do. So the team then move out to the area where it dispersed. They're trying to find any kind of physical evidence of what this is. So while they're out there, I think he says he looked, was it to the north? He looks up to the north and he notices that there are objects at very high altitude in the sky. And he contacts a radar facility. Now, what I assume from that, and a lot of people might say, well, hang on a minute, the walkie-talkies weren't working. He doesn't say that they weren't working. He says there was interference on them. They're still working, but they're not working how they should. Interference can be like levels of a static sound or whatever. So I just assume that they are able to make contact. It's just not clear. They're not functioning in the same way they are. Because that was one of the things I initially thought, well, how are you able to contact a facility to do something if your communications are not working?
Right.
But upon reviewing, I went back in the video to that part and he doesn't say they weren't working. He said there was interference.
Yes, he did.
So he says they contact the radar facility and they can't track anything. Their scopes are coming up with nothing. Now, if that's human aircraft, they should be able to come up with something. They should be able to track something going on. But what he notices is these objects are moving at extremely high speed, but they're stop-starting. So they're making maneuvers that just a human couldn't do in an aircraft because of gravity. The effects it would have on somebody would be damaging. They're like traveling really fast and then coming to a halt, like almost immediately. He then notices another object, and I'm sure, if I'm remembering correctly, he says it comes from the south. It came from the opposite direction, and again, it's high speed. It sort of pulls an immediate stop maneuver pretty much close to where they are, and then it projects a beam down to the ground. That's how he describes it, as a beam. And I think he says it wasn't sort of radiating anything. He didn't think it was light, or it was a light, because it was just like there was nothing radiating from it like you would expect with a light. So it was like just it's kind of hard to describe, I suppose, but he just says that like the beam came down to the ground quite close to where they were, and then it shut off quick. And he's there thinking at this time, there's some form of intelligence going on here. Like, what's controlling these objects? There is an intelligence behind it. But he doesn't see how it can be possible that a human is controlling these things due to the nature of, again, how they were moving, the types of G-force involved. There's no inertia. Like when they come into a stop, they're just like stopping dead, which aircraft can't do. You have that slow down to a stop, the inertia, that's not happening. Now, in his opinion, he doesn't think that these objects were of US or UK or even Soviet origin, just due to the nature of what they were. He does say like there were 5 other witnesses that he confirmed, but there could have been up to 30 or 40 other people who saw it as well. Now, again, I guess some skeptics feel that because when his team went out there, they had a predisposition of something strange from the report initially that came back to them that prompted them to go out there in the first place. But he contests that's not the case. He's like, no, I'm going out there looking for a conventional explanation. I'm not going out there looking for the fantastical. Again, he's professional, military. He's a colonel. He's really high ranking. Him sort of jumping off at the deep end, it's not what he's trained to do. That he's the guy that he's going to be the skeptic out in the field.
I think he was still desperately trying to hang on to a rational explanation all the way up until he saw the orange light himself.
That's it. He wants this to be something that can be explained away and put in a little neat box and tied up and put on the shelf. He doesn't want something weird going on. That doesn't work well for what you're trying to do at that time. So, he's professed, he had no idea what was happening. As he says, all he can say is he's sure that there was an intelligence behind the objects and the actions that he was seeing. He doesn't believe that it was any hostile intention either. He gets that feeling that it was more curiosity rather than any kind of offensive action. No one was harmed. No one was hurt. Given the nature of what was going on, you would think that anything that was able to put these objects out there would be capable of inflicting a great deal of damage, given the nature of how they were moving, if they so chose to. Well, one of the interesting things is the colonel himself was conducting an investigation afterwards. He's obviously interviewing the people that saw it initially to gain information. He mentions about one of them who saw it initially had noted that there was on this vehicle that they saw, this object that they saw, that there was a strange hieroglyph type markings on it. They also have claimed to have physically touched the object. So this isn't the colonel's team. This is the team that had seen it initially that prompted the colonel to go out there. Now, what was interesting was he didn't know at the time, but the authorities were conducting their own investigation concurrently with his. He wasn't aware of this. They were also interviewing people. Now, it gets a bit speculative here, and he he sort of speculates that the authorities, I'll say in inverted commas, the authorities, because whether it was official, whether it was military, whether it was sort of NSA type, shall we say,
Right.
he speculates that they may have been using sodium pentothal when they were interviewing.
Right. Okay.
If anybody doesn't know, that's a truth serum. Sodium pentothal is something that they used in the war. In the Second World War, we captured prisoners. You would use it. It makes people open to suggestion, but it makes them more talkative. It essentially, like, you will give over information more willingly. So whether they were using it because they felt that that was a way of getting more clear and definitive information, that this wasn't some kind of prank, this wasn't some people deciding to have fun or whatever, on the base. But again, I think he doesn't confirm that. That's kind of a suspicion, and I think it was sort of based on what feedback he was getting from the people that had been interviewed by the authorities. I'm just using authorities in a very loose sense. I'm not using it to define government, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Holt
said that they told him that they were injected.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what were you injecting them with? If you're interrogating somebody and you inject them with something, usually it's going to be something because you want to get information out of them, and sodium pentothal is the
go-to
thing they would use. Yeah. So he concludes himself that the events were unexplained. So again, I mean, he's not going with aliens. He's just saying it's unexplained. I can't attribute any rational explanation. I didn't come across anything that would lead me to believe that it was one thing or the other. He just can't explain it. What happened was strange. There's never been an official explanation. People that have contested it have said, oh, it was the lighthouse. Well, how does that explain? That could explain a light in the sky that you're not familiar with. But it doesn't explain everything else, I would say. And one thing he did mention, and I agree with him on this, what's strange about it in conclusion is, given that this all happened in close proximity and in the vicinity of a nuclear airbase at the height of the Cold War, he was surprised that both the US and the UK military didn't pursue the investigations any further. They sort of closed the book on it, and that was it. And he believes that the reason that this was the case was to avoid attracting more attention to what happened, which would then draw more public attention to what happened. And I think it's fair to say that he believes that the sort of respective governments at the time knew more than what they were letting on. And that this sort of case was closed, shut the book on it, don't draw attention to it.
He specifically said, I believe more than one bureau knows more than they're telling.
I think bureau rather than authority would be a better word to use in terms of describing those that were conducting the concurrent interrogations of the eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
Authority sort of implies direct government. I don't know whether that would be the case or whether it was sort of national security type people.
Mm-hmm. He was very careful about what he said and how he said it.
Yeah, he was.
And to be fair, the interviewer was trying to get him to say certain things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was impressed by it because the interviewer was pressing him. And it's not like the interviewer was there just, oh, yeah, oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's fantastic. And, oh, he was a lighthouse there. Sure, how do you know it wasn't that? He was interviewing him. It was really well done. He was interviewing him as a skeptic to this type of thing would. What I was impressed by Colonel Holt was the fact that he didn't leap to the fantastical. He kept it well within the realms of, I saw stuff that I can't explain, that could be explained, just nobody has ever told me what it was. I don't know, but it's not stuff that was in like he says, it's not within his sphere of experience, and he's an experienced Air Force guy. He'll have seen a lot of high tech stuff. He's basically running a nuclear airbase, for God's sake. The height of the Cold War. He's going to be privy to certain things because that's in the interests not just of national security, but global security. And yet he could not come up with anything that he could say, yeah, it was this. I agree that it was explained and that it was strange, but this is what it was, and we shut the book on it because that's all it was, and anything else is just the flight of fancy. Mm-hmm. No, he's basically saying, I have no idea. I don't know what it is. I've no idea what it is at all. And I thought that was kind of impressive, because sometimes with people who do want to share these kind of stories, they do tend to sort of embellish a little bit, like they do try to sort of paint a picture of it, which was a bit more fantastical, I guess, to try to make it more sensational. And if anything, I think he was just trying to play down some of the things that he saw as just being, don't know what it was.
Well, I don't know what it was, but if anybody out there knows what it was and knows for sure that it was aliens, can you please give these aliens my contact information? Because I am ready to go jet setting around the universe. Elon Musk, I saw a clip that he reposted on his X account the other day where he was talking about how it's a crazy time in the world and there's a lot of crap going on and stuff is bad, and he said, and we're working on fixing a lot of problems, but he said, you can't just make everything about just fixing one bad thing after another. He says you have to be open to doing better than that.
Yeah.
He made a reference to Earth as the human cradle. He said, this is where we start. He said, we need to get out there and expand humanity into space. It was very inspiring what he said.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. I think this is step 1, and I am so ready for step 20 because I want to go to space with aliens. I think that would be so awesome.
Not at those speeds they were flying around, though. I don't think I'd like my skeleton liquefying due to extreme G-forces. But yeah, just to follow up with that, if anybody wants to watch the full interview, it's about an hour long. It's very interesting. It's on YouTube, and the YouTube channel is 7 News Spotlight. So if you go there, you'll find it. I think it's an Australian channel. Well, certainly the interview is Australian, I'm sure. So it's very interesting because, there will be people out there that will say, well, surely it was this, surely it was that. But there's never been, according to the Colonel, there's never been an actual official explanation as to what it is. I mean, governments will always try to say, oh, it's this. But there was the investigation was just sort of dropped. It went away. I'm pretty sure that if there had been an official explanation, underlined, this is what it is, he would have said that. He would have gone, right, okay, that's it. He doesn't come across as the kind of guy that would immediately want to leap to the fantastic as being the only acceptable explanation for what he saw. It is a strange one. I think it's fascinating as well. I remember seeing initially on, I think it was something like the Discovery Channel, one of those channels maybe, on the TV years and years ago, and I knew nothing of it. I mean, that's the thing. Until I saw that, I actually didn't know anything about it. So it's not something that, like Roswell in the US, everybody knows about that around the world.
It's funny because there's more information about this than there is about Roswell, to be honest.
Yeah. And you've actually got, a high-ranking colonel that was in the US Air Force at the time, giving you the account of it. And you would think that would have quite a lot of traction, but I think that in itself is a little strange, is how was it? I mean, maybe that's my own ignorance, but you don't really hear much of it. Certainly in the same way as Roswell. Yet, like you say, there's a lot more information, and certainly there's a lot more vivid accounts, and it's not as easily explainable, I don't believe, as Roswell is. Whether you go along the whole thing of what it actually was at Roswell, and I guess part of it is because they didn't actually find anything physical. I guess that's what it boils down to. So, that just seems to be the big dividing factor in it. They didn't actually find the wreckage of anything. So, yeah, who knows what it was?
And wreckage turned into a weather balloon over here, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. So,
No evidence.
no
Nothing to see
evidence.
here. Moving along.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's time for our segment called One Question.
Mm.
One of us asks the question, what would you do? The other asks, what do you believe? This week, Aidy, I believe you are asking me, what do I believe?
Yes. Would you like me to kick off with it?
Knock yourself out.
All right. So this isn't necessarily going to be space based, science fiction, alien based. However, my question is, and it's the question of what do you believe? Do you believe that the various equipment used by paranormal investigators can provide sufficient proof of the existence of ghosts or other supernatural entities, or are they merely gimmicks with no scientific value?
Ooh, don't put me on the spot. Okay. Um, I believe because it isn't even agreed upon what is evidence of paranormal, because some things are evidence to some people, some not so much. I believe that when it comes to the tools that we use, the more that we use, the better,
Yeah.
because I believe the closest we're ever going to get to proof with a tool until Jesus rips open the sky and all your old family members, the hey, this is what's going on. Until we
Yeah.
get something that concrete, the closest we're ever going to get to evidence is going to be through amount
Yeah.
more than science, if you know what I'm getting at. The more of
Yeah.
it you have, the more we have proof that something is happening.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely valuable to have that. I think it's going to be important to have tools that consistently perform a certain way only in certain conditions, and they do that across the bar for everybody that's using this tool. And I
Yes.
think that starts to bring more value and more believability to the evidence the more you get. Still, even that doesn't confirm what you're getting. It just confirms that the same phenomenon is happening. It doesn't really say it's ghostly,
No.
or it doesn't confirm what it is, only that something is happening. So I think, yes, tools are valuable because I don't think we found the right one yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that trial and error is going to have a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
It would be exciting if more scientists were looking for answers in this particular area. I think there's a dismissiveness in science towards the paranormal,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we definitely need to keep the experiments going. I wish that there was a global data bank where people could go in and put what their experiments were and what the conclusions of the experiments were
Yeah.
on a, to try to bring some of this together in one place so that we can start saying, okay, there's a lot of stuff coming in from this particular tool or that particular tool, and we can get more of a global effort going on. Right
Yeah.
now, it's because it's not taken as seriously as physics and chemistry and biology and different avenues of science. The evidence is fragmented.
Yeah.
It's more individuals hold more of the evidence than a big collective. And I think that we should move towards putting together a global collective for that. So, yeah, I think it's valuable. I don't want to, I don't want to say it can prove. I'm just not ready to say. I don't think I'm ready to say that it absolutely proves the paranormal, but I
Yeah.
think it's valuable. If that makes any kind of sense. If
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
cop out answer, then it's a cop
No,
out
no, it's
answer
not. I
because
think that is the case until that
yeah.
we actually get some semblance of reliable equipment that is provable over a period of time of giving the same results.
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, I think it's fair to say that. I think it's perfectly fair to say that you can't dismiss it because we don't, we're not there yet. But you're not going to get there without using anything in the first place.
That's
So
it. Yeah.
you have to start somewhere, and having a foothold with regards to having something that you can use that may not be brilliant right now, but might be good enough, so long as it's not giving purposefully false
Yeah.
information.
Stop using that old Panasonic audio recorder and stop selling them on eBay for hundreds of dollars. You're scamming people when you do that because those things are broken.
Yeah, the equipment has to function as a first point of reference. It has to be functional.
All right. Did I pass? Can I
You
ask you
certainly
something?
did. You can.
Marvelous. Okay. So my question is, what would you do? And my question is this. Let's say we're talking about someone, an absolute no nonsense person that we're
Yeah.
talking about this person who just is not going to pull a stunt. They're just all face value, all business all day long. Like your mom.
Mm.
Your mom, she believed that those children that we were watching on Britain's Got Talent were wasting their life.
Well, yeah, that's my mum, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, all business all day long. Let's say she comes to you and
Hmm.
she tells you, and she's perfectly of rational mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a paranormal podcast, so yeah, I'll let that go.
Okay, let
Hope
that
she
go.
doesn't listen to this ever. But yeah, go on.
She comes to you and she tells you, last week when you thought I was at church, I was actually meeting up with these aliens and just tells you the wildest story you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah.
But it is the only time, it is the only thing that is off about, her behavior. In any other circumstance, in any other time, she's
Hmm.
completely rational and with us in the real world. But on
Okay.
this one thing, she's absolutely adamant that this happened. What do you do with that?
Um, I think that if they were meeting up once a week, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go along and see this for
Mm.
myself then. That would be my, yeah, that would be the way that I would
Try to
want.
get involved.
Not necessarily involved, just to make sure that the person I was dealing with was really of sound mind and rationale and not gone completely berserk on me.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah,
so you start with the logical and just rule out any.
yeah, which you know me, that is exactly
Yeah,
what I would do. You
yeah.
know, I'm
I'd be at home packing a suitcase. You know what I'd do.
yeah, you'd be doing that, and I'd be just a bit more healthily skeptical. As I say, that would be the moment where, you know, Scully would come out, and I'd be like, no, I need to see this because this
Mm.
is clearly out there, and I need to make sure that we're not dealing with a medical emergency that's about to happen.
Mm. But yeah, outside of that, there's nothing wrong with it, and it doesn't have to be your mom. It could be anybody that you
Mm.
absolutely trust to, like the Prime Minister of the UK. Let's say they start saying some crazy
Well, I mean,
stuff.
that wouldn't be just down to me to deal with that. There'd be plenty of other people that can get involved in that.
Yeah, yeah,
But no, if it from that perspective, you know, I would have to have some kind of proof. You know,
mhm.
people are also capable of doing pranks on you and pulling pranks on you. So, you know,
So you wouldn't just say that a person's reputation would be the proof in this case.
um,
You couldn't go with that.
no,
Yeah.
no, I can't. There's
No.
something that out there like that. No,
Yeah.
I really couldn't. I'd have to be like, no, I need to. I'm sorry, I just need to actually have some evidence of this, please. You know, I'm not. I don't take things on blind faith. You know that. I have a
Yeah.
real hang up with that. So yeah, I'd have to investigate this thing myself and see this thing myself. I'm not just going to kick back and go, yeah, go, sure, I believe you, you know, 100%. I'd be just like,
Yeah.
all right, can I see? And if they were like, well, no, and I'd be like, why? And then it'd be like, okay, do I
Yeah.
need to have an intervention called here right now? Because, you know, it's a lot to digest. There's certain things you can take on faith, but something like that is
Yeah.
fundamentally like groundbreaking. No,
Yeah.
you got to come at me with something else.
The reason I asked you that question or where it came from was there's an old movie that Don Knotts made called The Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
Mm,
Don Knotts' character spends the night in a haunted house and he comes out with this crazy tale. And
yeah,
it ends up because the family is trying to sell the house or tear the house down. It ends up in a courtroom where he's having to account for what he saw.
yeah,
And another witness who is testifying on Don Knott's character comes in and he's very factual. He says I think he might even be like some kind of physicist or something. A very credible guy. And he's telling about how this person would never lie,
yeah.
and everything about him seems perfectly normal. And then the lawyer asks him a question about where his last business, he referenced the business meeting. I wish I had seen this in the last 20 years because it's hard to dig it out of my memory. But the guy said that he was going to business meetings once a year somewhere. And the lawyer asked him where those business meetings were held. And he just said, on Mars.
Right,
And it's
yeah.
like, that's it. You're out. Testimony gone. Everything you just said doesn't count anymore.
That kind of reminds me of an episode of Frasier where
Mm.
Frasier and his dad are both supporting two opponent politicians in this election. Frasier throws in with this guy, and this guy's like super rational. He's great, you know, like,
Mm.
and he's, he's sort of having debates with his dad over this. And, Frasier's like candidate is like super great. You know, his dad's candidate is just sort of like, your old sort of traditional, like conservative Republican type.
Mm.
And Frasier's candidate, he's sort of your more sort of. I'm being very generalised here because I'm aware of the political climate right now, and it's not. You got to remember, this is back in the 90s. This is not the same. His is like it is the opposite, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
Frasier's really chuffed with his client, and he's doing really well. And then his client drops this bombshell about aliens. And Frasier's dad just starts laughing at him, and you just see like Frasier's face drops because you know that the election is over at that point.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
if I remember, because it's been quite a number of years since I've seen it, but I don't know if the guy sort of claims he's getting instructions from aliens or something like that on this thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, Frasier just basically dies on the spot with it, you know.
Yeah.
And his dad's just sat there, like, if you can imagine how his dad always had that smug laugh, you know, because he knew that his candidate was toast in that moment because everyone was going to say he was crazy, you know. It comes out of the blue and it's really funny. It kind of reminds me, how you were describing that kind of reminds me of that episode. It was just so funny.
It could be very well that episode was Frasier is a play on that
Yeah, I'd have to.
movie.
It might be a clue, might be in the title of the episode. As I say, it's been so long since I've seen it, but I remember just how funny it was because it sort of builds up and then this just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, this guy's never made any hint at all that he might have some kind of a bit of an off the wall kind of thing. It just comes out of nowhere in this interview, and it just sort of like Frasier's just completely destroyed because he's like, you know, in the series, if anyone's ever seen it, and if you've not, why not? You know, he's like a very public radio psychiatrist, so he's throwing his endorsement publicly and putting his reputation on the line in doing so, in backing this guy. And of course,
he had a stroke.
Yeah, it just goes completely out of the window. It's so funny. But that kind of, when you were talking about that then, it sort of reminded me of that, where you've got this person with an absolute impeccable record, well respected, and then suddenly they absolutely hit you with something so far from left field that you've no chance of even, you know, anticipating it at all. They've not even give you a clue. They literally just pull something out of the hat like that. It's great comedic wise, but yeah, in that situation, I mean, you know, you'd be like, right, okay, well, I really need to have evidence here because I'm about to throttle you otherwise. You know? You better have some bloody good evidence, otherwise, you know, you're going out the window kind of thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are we done?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much if you're still with us for listening to us.
Yeah.
We hope you continue to do so.
Yeah.
You can find us on iTunes, Podcast Addict, and always you can listen on the website itself. Stay tuned in the future. We're going to be adding some articles and different things like that to the website. And we appreciate you very much. If you have a ghost story you would like us to tell on a future show, please send that to stories@postaboutghosts.com.
Yeah.
Let us know if it's a fiction story or something that really happened. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Bye.